In His grace, God gave us a sequential end-time timeline that was hidden in the Psalms for thousands of years, waiting to be discovered. It has now been revealed here at the last minutes of the church age. This channel discusses end-time prophecy from the unique perspective of the encrypted timeline in the Psalms. If you want to know where we are on the timeline, please subscribe and take some time to watch the other videos on this channel. Also, please consider purchasing a copy of Encrypted, Unlocking the Timeline Revelation in the Psalms. Not only will it help you to better understand the time we're living in, but it will also be a very important book to leave behind. I'm sorry. You're kind of stepping in the middle of this. We've been talking. You're going to be like, what is this crazy guy talking about, right? So I'm going to try to use some.
Very interesting, though.
Have you guys prepped him at all? Like,
no, we don't like to do that.
No.
It's just
then I put people straight out.
throw him into the meat grinder.
She said, just come over here. You see all the cars?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, cars!
I did take a picture of the cars.
Well, there's food too. Cars and food.
Thank you, guys.
Coffee,
I
water.
appreciate it.
Okay, so the one that goes across the country, not the one down there, but the one that goes across the country
These are eclipses, yeah.
is the one that happened in 2017. Okay? And that one crossed 7 cities named Salem. Seashells, I can't do it. So the one that's coming next month is coming up through Mexico, through Texas, and on up through Maine and all. That one's going to cross a total of 8 cities named Nineveh, which of course, biblically, Jonah was supposed to go and tell them that they were going to be destroyed in 40 days, right? But they repented and God relented. He didn't destroy them. So the question is, will America repent? And the reason why I believe this is America's time is it's all about Israel. Remember, the tribulation period ahead is all about Israel.
Right.
And we are already starting to turn our backs on Israel. I mean, you hear it all the
Yeah, you
time,
can already
right?
hear it being changed.
Yeah, right.
Oh, I didn't have heard that. Well, I kind of figured it was happening, but.
Yeah, because Israel, you know, I think it's interesting that when America goes into a country and we want to, expand democracy or whatever, we just blow them to smithereens and nobody says anything, right? Nobody's like watching it like a football game with the score tally and all, like, oh, shame on you, you only lost, 20 people today and you killed 60, so that's not fair. But now they're when you watch the news, it's like they talk like war's supposed to be fair, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, well, I'll give you 20 and we'll take 20. Like, what?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. You go to war to win.
Yes.
And we'll give you a 6-week break if you let go of our people.
Well, no, it's even worse than that. So if you give us 50 people, we'll give you 5,000 of your terrorists back that we have in prison.
And cash.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they gave them cash too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So they can rearm and attack again.
But all the demonstrations here against Israel, it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, they were attacked. And the reality is,
If we get attacked like that, we're blowing everybody up.
oh yeah.
Instantly. But they can't do it.
I mean, so they call it, and I get it completely, they call it their 9/11, right? Well, what did we do? We went and blew up people that had nothing to do with it. We're just like, hey, if you look at us crooked, we're coming after you, and we're taking you down, right?
That's right. We're all going down.
And everything's all for it then, too.
Yeah, no.
Right.
What country was like, except for if you were a Muslim country being attacked,
Right.
what country stood up and said, that's shameful what you're doing? Everybody, they built a coalition and started invading all these countries.
Yeah.
But so now Israel, who, I believe this is a setup from the beginning. Okay, I think we talked about this one night where Paul, it's kind of like a pattern. Paul had a thorn in the flesh, right?
Yeah.
And he asked for it to be removed and God said, my grace is sufficient for you. I think the Arabs living in Israel and all around them, they're the thorn in Israel's flesh as a pattern. And it's Psalm, help me out here, Psalm 120, I think at the beginning of the Psalms of Ascent.
You think one of us is going to remember better than
I know, huh? I got too many of them in my head. But specifically says that Israel has dealt too long, or lived with too long, those who want war when Israel wants peace. That's what kicks all this off, right? In the Psalms of Ascent, which is the time period we're living in, that was kind of I'm pretty sure it was Psalm 120. I may be wrong. I probably have it.
And Caesar, he wrote this before October 7th happened. And it spells out pretty good what the...
Oh, you wrote that book?
Yeah, sorry, it's big.
It's a good book. It's very...
Yeah, 120 is the Song of Ascent.
You have an audiobook already? I'm good on audiobooks.
I gotta figure out how that works.
You can get digital
'cause
copies.
Yeah.
You can get it digital, like for Kindle or whatever,
Yeah.
but I don't think there's an audiobook. I could just see me having to narrate my book. As I mentioned the city of... No, everybody would be like... It'd be terrible. I wouldn't want to listen to it. So anyway, I think that the U.S., I think that we're already heading down the path of turning our backs on Israel. I think that we are going to come under judgment for that. You know, we as a nation have a lot of sins under our belt, right? Whether it's abortion or whatever, you can just go on and on. I mean, yeah, there's so many things. Supposedly, you know, as a Christian nation, we've allowed a whole lot of horrible stuff to come out of this country.
Just the number of abortions.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's been a long time coming. I think that we are going to be under judgment, and I think what we're going to do with Israel, which is turn our backs on them, is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, basically. I think that's going to be the end of it.
Yeah.
So, as you all know, I believe 100% that we are actually witnessing the Gog-Magog war of Ezekiel 38-39 right now. I think that started on October 7th. So, when that finally happens, like the end of it, remember we talked about how a lot of the I don't want to say the rabbis. It's more than just what they believe now. It's what, you know, hundreds, almost 2,000 years ago, what they wrote. If they were inspired by God to write these things, you know, I can't say. But it's awfully amazing how much of what they wrote has already come true. Like the October 7th date, for instance, right? And it's just a lot of things that they sort of predicted, that they wrote about, that have come true. And so one of them was that the Gog-Magog invasion, when you read it, you think it just looks like something that happens really fast, right? But then you've got these ancient writings saying that it's going to take 12 months. It's going to be a 12-month engagement, so to speak, right? And then it's going to happen on the last day of Feast of Tabernacles. What's exactly when it happened? October 7th was the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles. And it's carrying on, and even then the whole Amalek connection, and then the Bible codes, the ELS codes that talked about the same thing, which they discovered before October 7th. It was like a month before. Were you here when we were talking about the
Sounds
ELS
familiar.
thing? This?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's just an awful lot going on there, and then you've got the 80-year, you know, here, how Israel knows that their days are numbered because of the 80-year, I don't want to call it a curse, but 80-year, whatever. They know that they've never survived. Israel was reborn in 1948, so it was on May 14th, 1948, Israel became a nation again after almost 2,000 years in exile, right? Throughout their history, they have never survived more than 80 years as a unified sovereign nation. They've been taken over by, you know, Greece, Rome, Babylon, whatever, every time before they ever got there, okay? So the point is they know And the Muslim, the Arab nations all around them also know that Israel's days are probably numbered if this pattern is like, they think of it as a curse. But Israel has decided that this time, and we've seen the video of like Naphtali Bennett, their previous prime minister, saying, this time we're going to make it. We're going to get past 80 is what he's saying, right?
Yeah.
However, I don't think so, because all of this falls directly in the middle of the timeline. Their 80 years matches Psalm 128, it matches Psalm 80, and it matches Psalm 55, all of which speak of not good things happening. They all point to Revelation chapter 12, which is when Israel has to flee to the desert. It points to Daniel 9:27, same exact thing. Points to Matthew 24:15, same exact thing. Just over and over the Bible repeats that there's going to be this day when they see something happen in the temple, which still has to be built, and when they see that, they need to flee out of the city or they're going to be killed. And then you go to Zechariah chapter 13 and then 14, and it talks about how 1/3 of Israel is going to be killed. I'm sorry.
1/3 is going to be saved.
1/3 is going to be saved. 2/3 will be killed. All of that aligns with the same time period. So, in my book, I don't know if anybody's there, I call it the refuge, because Revelation chapter 12 says specifically that God has prepared a place for them for 3.5 years. That He's going to protect them and take care of them for that period of time. I wrote a lot about this, and this is totally a chapter in a book this week, but I can't cover all that. So, because I'm getting off track already. So let's talk about the solar eclipse. I'll try to get back to it.
Do me a favor, in a really quick summary. Say, for Caesar's benefit, how you came about this, because
It
somebody
sounds like you're dissecting everything, which is it's very interesting. Actually.
But God revealed Scripture to him. Everything he's talking about is just Scripture. It's not like he came up with this.
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's
God is
dissecting
just
everything, which is pretty interesting.
Would that sum it up pretty good?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll try. Basically, though. Okay, I've been studying. I was just explaining to Tammy this week. I always say, like, for 20 years I've been studying Bible prophecy. But then I got to thinking about it. Wait a minute. I had a friend from Germany came, and I think it was 1999. His name's Lars. Came to visit me, and I was telling him about all this stuff then. So that's like 25 years ago now, right?
That's not.
And I had already been studying all this well before this. So I don't really know how long I've been studying. It's not like I'm looking at the clock. Okay, I'm gonna start on this day and 19 whatever. So, but I had always, tried to figure out a lot of different things, and you read all the prophetic scriptures, and it's hard to like pinpoint where everything fits. You can see patterns, and you can see pretty clearly that God tells the future based on the past, based on patterns. And then when you hear, if you hear rabbis teaching from the Talmud, their sort of oral tradition Bible, right? So they have the Torah, and then they have their oral tradition, which explains what the Torah means, basically.
Yeah.
And when they teach from that, they talk a lot about patterns. And so that's something that I believe Christians don't understand, because we've divorced ourselves from the Jewish mindset of everything. We have a Western way of looking at it. So when I used to study Scripture, or prophecy, I would look at it more from, okay, here's this prophecy, did it get fulfilled or not? So then I'm thinking, so if it didn't, like Damascus. We were talking earlier about Damascus. The Bible tells us, Isaiah 17, I can't remember exactly, that Damascus is going to be destroyed one day to where it's like a heap of ruins, it's just uninhabitable, right? That hasn't happened yet. So, in my mind, that means that I looked at prophecy as a one-to-one, right? A prophecy is given, and then it's fulfilled and it's done. But the Bible does not actually really go in that same course. The Bible, God uses patterns in prophecy
to tell the story so that we can more fully understand it if we're willing to put in the time to study it. And I tend to jump like into the deepest well that I can find, like I've done over the last couple of weeks. I got into, many of you studied Genesis 15, where Abraham, or it's Abram at that time, where he, and this is all in here, and I'm not going to talk about this much tonight, but where God makes a covenant with Abram, right, about his descendants and the land.
Right.
And he tells Abram to take a heifer, a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, and a 3-year-old ram, and a turtle dove, and a pigeon. Cut them in half, separate the pieces. Okay, so Abram did that. And then God basically put him to sleep, kind of like he did Adam. He had like it turned dark, and it talks about like, you know, a terrible, it just looked like a nightmare. And I think Abram kind of fell asleep at that point, and then God did his thing. So God then comes and he passes through the middle of that, and that was a sign of a covenant back then. I think there's another chapter of the Bible that talks about the same sort of thing, like you cut an animal open and then you pass through the middle, and that's a sign of a covenant.
That's what the Jews are doing right now, right? Where they just picked up 3 new heifers and...
Well, the heifers, that's from Numbers 19, and what they're going to do there is they'll take one of them. They only need one of them.
One, yes.
Yeah, and it has to be perfectly red and all that, and then they'll sacrifice it and burn it basically, and they need the ashes to mix with water and then sprinkle it on people and the temple and all that, so that they can't build the temple until they have the red heifer.
Or finish building it, correct?
Well, they haven't started building it yet. They have plans for it, and they also have a lot of the implements, and there's a good chance that somewhere, kind of unbeknownst to people, that they're building pieces of it. But I believe, and I've heard rabbis say, that once they get the green light, like in 6 months, this thing's going to be up. Like,
wow,
they're on it.
Prefab, it's all prefab.
Yeah, probably.
They're ready for it too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they've been ready for a long time.
Yeah.
But, so I don't know, I totally lost my train of thought. I could talk about the heifers all night too. What was I talking about?
How you came about making your book?
Oh, whoo boy, oh my gosh. So, okay, deep well, I remember that. So I'm trying to piece all this stuff together. And one night, a few years ago, I had been teaching at church, prophecy studies like once a week, and I was writing a lot and studying a lot so that I could write, and then so that I could teach. And I'm probably a terrible teacher, because like I said, I'm usually like the total solar eclipse. You know, nobody wants to hear that. So when I do freestyle, it's a little better, but when I try to actually stick to my plan, it's terrible. Absolutely terrible. Okay, so I was on my knees one night praying. Lord, I mean, I was so bewildered. Like it's like in my mind, I could see all of these puzzle pieces, but I couldn't figure out how they came together. And specifically what I was trying to figure out is I knew we were in the season, right, for all of this, but I couldn't find a way to actually figure out where in the season, right? And I thought like at 2020, a lot of things seemed like, well, honestly, the rapture should have happened and we should have been out of here. Mm-hmm. And we weren't. So I was a little confused. So I was on my knees one night and I was praying, and I just kept praying, Lord, I got these pieces, I just can't put them together. And so I got into bed that night, and I was still praying, just really meditating and talking to the Lord, praying about it. And all of a sudden, and these were not my thoughts, but he spoke 5 and 10. Not like audibly. It was inside me, right? Yeah. But these 2 odd numbers that I would have never in a million years thought meant anything, 5 and 10. So, okay, that doesn't make any sense. Shouldn't it be 7 or 14, like 7 times 7, or 7 plus 7, or 7 divided by 2, 3.5, and 3.5? You know, those are all things that you get out of prophecy for the last 7 years of the tribulation period. So I started doing what I usually do, and that's study, and God kind of made me a researcher. I love to just dig in and research, and so I started doing that, and it all kind of started to come together. So the two numbers were a key that sort of unlocked all of this. It turns out, there are 15 Psalms of Ascent, and they're divided in a 5 and a 10. Okay, that's interesting. There's just a lot of things that are 15 and 5 and 10. The short version of God's name in Hebrew, which is Yah, equals 5 and 10. Then we have the water ceremony where the priests would come down from the temple on the Feast of Tabernacles, which completely is talking about the millennial kingdom reign, right? If you understand all the feast days in Israel, and that Jesus fulfilled the first 4, there's 3 remaining. The last one is Tabernacles, which is when he abides with us here on earth, right? Tabernacle means like tent, to dwell with, right? So on the Feast of Tabernacles, they would come down the stairs from the temple. It's like heaven, right? All this is sort of symbolic. And they would stop on the 10th step down, which is the 5th step up out of 15 steps, and they would blow trumpets. They didn't necessarily understand why they were blowing trumpets, but they knew that they were supposed to blow trumpets on that step. And then they would keep going down. And so all of this relates to the feast days, it relates to the rapture. Almost 700 pages later, it all starts to make sense. But since finishing the book, which was in December, I keep jumping into the well over and over, and I keep finding new things I can't find anything that doesn't match. It's like everything, it's sort of like that key unlocked a whole world. Once you start scratching below the surface, it's like it's never ending. So that's why, when I come to like Abraham in Genesis 15, and he's got this thing going with God where he's, splitting animals and doing all this weird stuff. And if you've ever heard that, I don't think a lot of preachers preach on that Sunday mornings. Probably never heard that. But yeah, because it's kind of weird and all. And I went and I tried to figure out, I just tried to read historically, what people, scholars, believe that's about. And you get different ideas, and it's all basically, when God makes a covenant with us, it's binding, and we don't really have to do anything. It's all on Him, and you get a lot of that. But really, think about it, Caesar, this way. Why did God tell Abram specifically a 3-year-old heifer? A 3-year-old. He was very, very specific about it, right? Why? There has to be a reason. So then when you go and you look at under the Mosaic law, the law of Moses, they didn't take 3-year-old heifers. They did you're right, okay, for Numbers 19, the red heifer does need to be 3 years old, okay? But everywhere else it's a 1-year-old. So why is this different, right? So I think I'm just the guy that keeps asking why, and then I go and research and figure out why. So if you this is crazy, okay? If you take
Finally, he's gonna say something crazy.
if you take the animals that God said, right? There were 5 of them at 3 years old each. What do you get? 15. And then when you put those on the timeline, okay, the first one's a red heifer, 3-year-old, not red, just 3-year-old heifer. Okay, it's not that specific, right? That lines up with 2020, 21, 22, that's those 3 years. In what years did Israel, were these things born and delivered? 21 and 22. So you've got the heifer. Next is a goat, is the 3-year-old female goat. And I wrote all about this. I'm not going to go into this tonight. But I want to show you something because I'd never heard of this before. Maybe you guys have. Remember I told you that the Antichrist, who is rising right now, and when you get to when you look at the Psalms that relate to the years we're in right now, before 2025, it's about horns rising, right? And in the Hebrew mind, what horns rising means is well, the Antichrist is called the little horn in Daniel 7, right? So out of 10, he's the 11th, and he's the little horn. He's rising right now. Okay, he's out there, and he's rising. So now you've got this goat. And remember I told you guys that the Antichrist in 2026, 2027, according to the Psalms, the pattern that I see in the Psalms, his main purpose is to get all of the Israelites back to Israel because he has to destroy them. So he's going to look like the good guy. The world's going to be in turmoil. But he has to destroy these Israelites so that they can never call out, according to Psalms 118 and Matthew 23 and Luke 20, I think. They can never call out to Jesus to come and save them, basically. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Okay, at the end of the tribulation, they're going to cry out. They're finally going to believe Jesus is the Messiah, not this guy that's trying to kill them, and they're going to call out to him. So God said that, it's cast in stone, right? So Satan's only winning strategy is to kill all the Jews so they can never do that. If they never do that, he wins, Satan wins. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
He has no other play. He can't win except for killing the Jews. Why do you think over and over throughout history he's constantly trying to kill the Jews, right? And what's happening now? You know, he's got the Arabs all wanting to kill the Jews. They all want to eradicate them. The Bible tells us they want to kill them off so that their name is not even remembered anymore in history, like it never happened. Iran, with their version of a map of the Middle East, doesn't even include Israel, right? They don't even look at a map that has Israel on it. They do not believe that Israel has any right to exist there, or at all.
Wow.
So this is a mindset that's honestly pure evil, and it has to be from where? It's not from God, right? It's totally demonic.
And our professors are teaching it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that Israel's the bad guy. Now, I'm not going to say that Israel isn't bad in a lot, just like America, right? So think about it this way, because I struggle with this sometimes. I think, yeah, you know, I see a lot of the things that they're doing, the government, that's probably not right, right? Okay, well, does that make the people of Israel bad? No. No more than we're bad because Biden's doing bad things, right? Or whoever's in charge.
If they're 80% atheist, and if their capital is mostly gay,
Yeah.
they're looking, I mean, we're the same.
Yeah.
But you know, you
Right.
don't expect that from Israel.
No.
That's their MO from the beginning of time. They couldn't go 40 days without worshiping another god.
Right.
Boom, 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 all.
Well, and see, that's a pattern. And like I showed you that picture,
God always,
You know.
they repented, they forgave, and then they did it again.
Yeah, look at this was during that concert over there. That was something that they
Yeah.
had up to like, what in the world?
on October 7th, when,
He caught that off of a video. There was a real quick video, and he grabbed that picture.
Buddhist,
off.
huh?
It looks
Yeah, they're
good.
worshiping
Look at
something
it.
there.
There's something there.
Remember how they
Crazy.
raided that whole whatever
Yeah.
they had going on?
I mean, it's tragic what happened. There's no doubt about it,
Right,
right?
right.
And they're no better or worse than we are over here, right? At
Right.
parties and orgies and whatever else, go booze and whatever, right? Concert thing. That's God's land.
That's God's land.
Yeah, and throughout Old Testament Bible history, who did God use to come against Israel? He would always use a worse nation, right, to come against Israel, but then he would also punish that worse nation eventually also.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
been the pattern.
When he's using you, don't think that's a great thing.
Yeah.
Because your time's
Right.
coming.
The bad thing is, you know, a lot of people will say, well, just like in the tribulation period, they'll say, well, you know, we're going to be protected. People who don't believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, they say, well, we'll be protected. God will protect us. Okay, well, what about all the times in Israel that they were attacked, right? So if you're the one good person, okay, well, think about Daniel and his buddies, right?
Right.
They were taken into captivity too,
Yeah.
right?
Whole bunch.
They weren't just left alone.
Right.
And their families were probably killed, and I'm guessing that they were made eunuchs, because
Yeah.
that's what they did, right? The Bible doesn't tell us that, but when you went into the king's court and you were a male, they made you a eunuch.
Yeah, so you were no threat,
Exactly. And so,
and you couldn't produce.
none of that's very fun.
No.
Yeah.
Now, do you believe that the Antichrist is one person in particular, or a variety of?
No, I believe the Antichrist is a person, and I believe that the Antichrist is probably at least partially Nephilim. Do you know?
Never heard of that.
Okay, Nephilim. Okay, so Genesis 3, Genesis 6, the story of Noah. When the Bible says that Noah was pure in his generations, what that means is genetically he was pure. It doesn't mean that he was righteous, like he was
Yes.
without sin.
Yes.
Only Jesus is without sin,
Correct.
right? So that's always been kind of confusing. But then when you realize that there's a gene war going on here, remember that in Genesis 3, God told Satan that the seed of a woman is going to crush his head, right? So that began what I call a seed war. Satan knew right then that one day that through the Adamic seed, right, the bloodline, we'll call it the bloodline, that he was going to be crushed. So since then he has tried to eliminate that seed, which goes through the Israelites, and then so it goes from Adam, through Noah, through Abraham, all the way through David, King David, Jesus, and that's what it's talking about. So the Messiah has to be of the Adamic and Davidic line. Okay. So you get to the part in the Bible where it's talking about how angels, the sons of God, the Benaha Elohim, came down, saw that women were beautiful, and they had offspring with them, and they're called the Nephilim. In some translations of the Bible, it calls them giants, okay, and they were giants. But so then you get to the time when it actually says that they were on this world, in the earth, then and then also thereafter. That's Genesis 6, okay? And then you get to the time when the Israelites came into the land, or they were about to come into the land, and Joshua and Caleb were sent along with 10 other spies into the land to scout out Canaan, basically, to determine if they could take it or not. Okay, 10 of the spies came back and said, oh man, there's no way we can take that land because we're like grasshoppers next. These people are giants, right? It was only Joshua and Caleb that said, yeah, we can take the land. Doesn't matter if they're giants or not because God's on our side, basically. They had faith and the other ones didn't.
Yeah.
So there's another story of giants in the land, right? And then you get to the king of Og, or the king named Og. He was the king of Bashan, which is kind of up there in the Mount Hermon area. And the Bible actually says he was so big that his bed was like 13 cubits long or something. It's like 20 feet long. Because this guy was huge, right? He was not just like a basketball player big.
Yeah.
These people, it's a mixed race. They're mixed with, well, there's no other way to say it. Angels mated with women, and their seed became giants.
Yeah.
Okay? And I know if you've never heard that before, this sounds crazy.
No, I've heard that one before.
But it's actually, throughout the Bible, it's just very subtly interwoven throughout the scriptures. Okay? So, is there a pattern there, right? And then when you really start studying, like, ancient texts about Nimrod, Gilgamesh, all these things that are really the same person, Osiris, and then you start looking at what the secret societies like the Freemasons and all, what they're really trying to do. They're trying to bring about a utopia with a leader at the helm, and that leader is no other than the Gilgamesh, basically, the resurrected Gilgamesh. So now we live in a time when we have genetic engineering ability,
Yeah.
right? And in 2003, a German expedition in Iraq was absolutely positive that they found the remains of Gilgamesh. And then, what, a week later, America went in and bombed Iraq. Pretty interesting. And we made a beeline, instead of like doing normal military things, we made a beeline for the museum in Baghdad that held those remains, and we took them.
That's Nimrod.
Nimrod, yeah, which is Gilgamesh, it's all the same, yeah.
That's Nimrod.
So-
That's interesting.
Yeah, so
Very
they got, so
When
we
you
got
start
that-
scratching under this Band-Aid, it's like, wow,
But
it
there's
gets
also-
so deep.
Yeah, there's, like, we only have a certain amount of books that we read now, but there's more books to the Bible that really help.
No, yeah, I've heard of that as
you
well.
should
That
really
there's a lot
read
more
that
out
really
there,
help
yeah.
you understand the whole entire Bible.
The Book of Enoch, you read the Book of Enoch, all of this will make sense. Which used to be part of the canon, but it's been taken out, you know. So there's a lot of books. You have to use some discernment. If you're reading a book, like I think I told you about 2nd Esdras,
Yeah.
if you read that and you get to a part where it says that the Messiah will rise from the sea, well, wait a minute. Yeah, I remember that in Revelation chapter 13, it says the Antichrist, the beast, is going to rise from the sea. Okay, this is deception. This is a book that was written to deceive people so that they'll have this book at a time and say, oh, look, that's the Messiah. Now, how that really, you know, that's symbolic, I'm sure. He's not really going to be like, oh, coming up out of the
Yeah, of course,
ocean.
yeah.
You know? But you say that, and now we've got these tic-tac UFOs going in and out of the ocean and stuff. So it's just like, maybe he will be like, oh, it's some spaceship coming out of the ocean. I don't know.
And we'll accept as
Yeah, well, we've been conditioned, right? The fact that we know about the tic-tac shaped UFOs going in and out of the ocean, and that people are expecting, you know, that like we're trashing the planet and aliens, ancient aliens are going to come and save us and all this stuff. I mean, it's crazy what a lot of people believe right now.
Yeah.
So, okay. You're probably thinking that all this is nuts at this point.
No, actually,
but-
this is kind of weird that I'm here. Thank you, by the way, Zarina, for telling me to come here. Cause see myself, I'm not much of a studier on a book per se, but I like listening to certain people and certain things about the Bible and about other religions in a sense. And
Yeah.
I like to just kind of, I haven't met a person like yourself that kind of dissects something. And it's very interesting for me to be here actually, because it's like there's a lot of questions that I might have the question about, you know. in
Oh,
this-
questions
That's what
are
we
great.
do. That's what we
Yeah,
do.
questions are great.
Yeah, but I'm talking about like, I might sound crazy to you on this one, you know, on things that I ask,
Yeah.
because it's just, there's a lot of stuff out there just like for that. I mean, I didn't even see that. That's crazy on Hollywood, you know.
Yeah. Well, when, you know, honestly, you'll never see that picture. The only way I got it, like Zarina was saying, was there was a really short video snippet on the news, and the cameraman passed by that so fast, right? Like showing people dancing
Yeah.
over here, and then whoop, and then over here dancing, and yeah, we're having a good time. And now the little, you know, little airplane things with little gliders or whatever were coming in. And what I did is I kind of caught it real quick, and I thought, what was that? And then I have a program that I use that I just went frame by frame and then took a snapshot of that, right? This is something they don't want you to see,
No,
but that's
of course.
what was going on. So, along with a lot of other bad stuff was going on God's land and
Yeah.
God's land. So, it's tragic what happened, absolutely. But history, Israel's history, and the patterns throughout the Bible indicate that when you do this kind of stuff on God's land, what else should you expect, right? He will use another nation to come against you every time. There's not an example where he didn't do that, right? So, well, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Well, thank you guys.
And let me just say though real quick, because I would be remiss if I didn't say this. The point of all this is to not say, hey, we're cool, we know more than other people or anything like that. The point of this is time is short. Jesus is coming back very soon. We are living in the last days. And whereas I think we've all spent our lives like just normal human beings building our own little kingdoms, right? Trying to put food on the table and do what we got to do. But God called us to put Him first and His kingdom first, which means bear fruit for His kingdom. So if we don't want to be the one standing in front of the Lord one day with nothing to show for our lives. And what I'm saying is like, you know, have we ever told anybody that we believe in Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Have we ever led anybody to the Lord? And have we ever, you don't have to lead anybody to the Lord, right? Because not everybody's going to accept,
Yeah.
right? But did you plant a seed?
Yeah.
What have you done for His kingdom?
Maybe feed some people?
So anything, you know, the Bible makes it so simple. The Bible tells us if you give a cup of water to a prophet, you'll get a prophet's reward, right? So it's not like you got to go out and be Billy Graham. He's not asking everybody to do that. We all have our own talents, and we all have the place where God put us.
Yeah.
But what are you using with your talents and your time in the place that He put us? So if the rapture happens tomorrow, what do we have to show for the time that He put us in this season, right? Where we knew, He warned us, one day He's coming back, and at that point, our time of working in the field, so to speak, is over. And what we've accomplished at that point is all we'll ever have, right? Because everything else is going to burn up. So that's the point of the book. It's not to just say, hey, you know, we know things that other people haven't figured out, which is kind of true. Boil it down. Okay, so that's a lot of introduction. But basically the book, the key,
Yeah.
that the 5 and the 10, it unlocked a timeline. Okay, the timeline started in, I would say 2017. And interestingly enough, you know, this first solar eclipse was in 2017. The timeline is made up of 2 sevens and also a 15. And they don't necessarily completely overlap though, so it's interesting. God doesn't do things on a one-dimensional plane. When you start digging into this, it makes sense, but it's not easy to kind of figure out, okay? So He's got a timeline that started in 2017 and runs through 2024. Then there's a space, and then another 7-year period starts, okay? But then He's got another timeline that is in here that starts at 2020 and runs through 2034. So the timelines are in here and in the 2 sets of Psalms, but since finishing the book, I mean, okay, we'll just do this. I'm going to skip a lot of this stuff. Okay, I really wanted to talk about the solar eclipse, but now that we're on it, I'm just going to go for this. So we talked about Anna or Hannah's timeline. Did everybody here, so I know Caesar, you didn't see it, but everybody here kind of see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so once the key unlocked all of this, so now what happened was my wife was reading the Bible to me while we were driving out of town. She was in Luke chapter 2, and all of a sudden she read this part where this lady named Anna in English, in our English Bible, saw Jesus when He was a baby at the temple. And it gives all this background on her. And so you have to stop first and think, why did God decide that we need all this background information about the lady who just happens to be at the temple that day, right? So when you start looking at the information the Bible gives us about her, it fits on the timeline. So there was an 84 in 3 verses about her. There was a 7. She was married. Then she was widowed. The book of Isaiah likens Israel to being a widow. Guess why? Because they killed their Messiah, right? Who was their husband. Remember, Israel is at Mount Sinai married to God. They said I do, right? But then they've basically played the whore. Sorry, Israel. If anybody ever listens to this, than Israel, but the Old Testament's full of that Israel's played the whore ever since. They've been the harlot, right? So they've never been faithful to God. That doesn't mean everyone in Israel isn't faithful to God, but as the majority, I think they haven't been. Nor have we, right? As a nation, we certainly haven't. But anyway, so dissecting that, and then because we have a timeline now, and we know that timeline ends at an 84, and all that revolves around Israel. So Israel, when they're 80, will be the middle of the tribulation period according to the timeline. 3.5 years later, when they see the face of Jesus in the temple or the tabernacle in Jerusalem, when he literally comes down and he's abiding with us, will be at the 84th year of Israel, since they were reborn in 1948. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so 1948 plus 84 gets us to 2032. Okay. Is that right? 2032? I hope so. Or I'm going to throw that away and start over. Yeah, that's right. So when she said, that this woman, Anna, who's in her 84th year of being a widow, saw the face of Jesus at the temple. Oh, okay, well now I understand why we're given all this backstory. And then it tells what her father's name was. Her father's name was Peniel, which in Hebrew means face of God, right? So you just got all these interconnections, and then that goes back to when Jacob wrestled with the angel, which was pre-incarnate Jesus, and he called that place Peniel, which means face of God, because he saw the face of God, but he didn't die, so he was amazed. So there are just all these connections, and what you find is when you use the key, and like for instance, when she said 84, I knew that I can plot that on the timeline. Well, it all fits, and then you go look at her story, and you look at all the stories, like the fact that her father's name was Peniel, and you go back to Genesis, go to Jacob wrestling with the angel at Peniel, right? And then you see all these other interconnections. The Bible is so interwoven, it is amazing. When we just read it, like, okay, I'm going to read 15 minutes of my Bible today, blah, 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 you don't pick it up.
You don't pick anything up.
You don't pick it up. And I used to do that too, and it was really, that's why I had so much of a struggle with trying to figure things out, and I was wrestling with that. And then when I was given the 5 and the 10, it's like it opened everything up. It literally was like a key, which is like why the book has a key on it, right? It just, everything kind of opened up from there. So now anytime I'm reading anything, or if my wife's reading it to me while I'm driving, if there's numbers involved, I'm like, bing, 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 right? Let me go look at that.
Stop the car.
Yeah, stop the, pull over. So we were talking about Abraham a minute ago. There's a 400 in there in the story in Genesis 15. There's actually 2 400s in Abraham's time, because he also paid 400 silver shekels for Sarah's tomb when she was 127 years old, and I'm still unraveling all that. But these 400s are interesting, because when you take the 6,000 year human history and you divide that by 400, guess what you get? 15. Just saying. So I don't know. I haven't quite figured the 400 yet out yet, but it keeps popping up lately. And 400. Okay, here's one talking about the crisscross, the Tav, right? So in Hebrew, the letter Tav is the 22nd and last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it looks like a cross. So basically, let me go back to this real quick. Basically, the 2 total solar eclipses over our country make a Tav, okay? Now when you add this piece on, last year there was a partial solar eclipse across our country, that makes an Aleph, which is their first letter. So when Jesus in Revelation says he's the Alpha and the Omega, in Hebrew that's the Aleph and the Tav. He's the beginning and the end, right? Well, we just happen to have over a 7-year period of time the beginning and the end basically spelled out over our nation. So the Tav, it gets even more interesting. The Tav, see, every Hebrew letter has a numerical value associated with it. The Aleph is 1, the Tav is 400. So 400 means the end. It means covenant, but it also means the end. So we've got this pattern now that I found in the life of Abraham with this 400, and there are other 400s in the Bible too. But here it is kind of spelled out also that we've got a Tav across our nation in a 7-year pattern. Does that mean it's the end? If we turn our backs on Israel, it's the end. And according to Ezekiel 38, no country is going to come to Israel's aid. Only God will protect and preserve Israel at the end of this war, which means America is not going to be there for. We're going to turn our backs on Israel.
I think God is doing that, will do that to show that that's protective, that's an entity.
Yes.
Just like when he brought them out of Egypt, right?
Right.
He made a point that everybody knew there's no man doing this. Pharaoh kept hardening his heart because he wants to let you go, but I'm not going to let him let you go. He's going to harden his heart and then he's going to change his mind. And I'm going to trash that guy so you know that it was me that brought you out. And nobody can say anything
Absolutely.
else.
That's the whole point. Even so, Psalm 124, which matches the Gog-Magog war, it alludes to the same thing. Ezekiel 38, it says specifically that the reason why God allowed this, and then he's the one that protects Israel, is so that he will be known not only in Israel but around the world.
The
And
interesting thing is about the leader from the north who put a
hook in his jaw, and yeah.
to
So
attack Israel.
God is in control of all of this, right?
Yeah.
The enemy to the north is Russia.
So
They're exactly
Joshua,
north of Israel.
What is it, 300 people? I'm only going to let you attack these guys at 300.
Right.
100,000 of those guys just to make a point.
In Gideon's, yeah.
Yeah, Gideon.
It had to do with how they drank water and stuff like
just to
that,
make a
right?
point. That's all you're going to get to take.
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
If you were one of those 300, you'd be like, what?
Let's do it.
I got picked.
Yeah, well, when God's fighting on your side, though,
That's
you're
his
in
point.
good
Yeah,
hands.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah. So let me just show you guys some of the timelines that I actually did this week. But first, I want to go back to something I was talking about a minute ago, because I am all off everything here, but it's okay.
Sorry about that.
No, it's
We do this
great.
to him every week.
But that's tomorrow, though. Here comes the no.
I haven't really even started editing these videos, but I don't know how I'd put any of this together in like a rational format, right? They'll just have to be like little mini shorts. Just like we're going all over the place.
I'm like watching Pulp Fiction here.
So, well, we also call Fridays Freaky Friday now too,
Yeah,
because we just talk
that's
about the
right.
craziest things
Yeah.
in here. But okay, so remember earlier I was talking about, we've said this before, that the Antichrist has to bring the Israelites back to Israel to destroy them. He's going to make it seem like, hey, come on back, because life's good here while the rest of the world's burning, which is the tribulation period. So the first 3.5 years, things in Israel, I think, are going to be pretty good under this guy, right? Which is how he rises to power, and everything's going to look great. And remember, I told you guys that he's basically leading the sheep to slaughter, right? So in all of this, in the study of Genesis 15, and the heifer, the 3-year-old heifer, the 3-year-old goat, the 3-year-old ram, I discovered something I'd never heard before. But it is absolutely so perfect and fits so perfect. The 3-year-old goat, okay, that brings us basically to the 2025 time frame when the sequence in the Psalms indicates that the tribulation period will start. Bad news is tribulation starts in 2025 according to the Psalms, the timeline that kind of has been unlocked in the Psalms, okay? good news for those who are saved, because the rapture will happen before that. According to the Psalms, it should happen before 2025, or right around that point, or maybe, I mean, it could happen today. But basically, we're like within the year right now of when the rapture of the church should happen. So we're in the kind of proverbial month of Elul, which is 40 days of getting your life ready, because you got to get your act together with God. You need a relationship with God, and you want to make sure all your family and your friends know that they need Jesus in their life. Okay? But so here's the crazy thing. The goat, that time period, remember I said rising right now, the horns are rising. Okay. There is what's called a Judas Goat. Has anyone here ever heard of this?
That's like the atheist goat, right?
Well, this is super crazy. Okay, we all think of goats as kind of like a satanic figure and all, right? Well, so it just so happens that the goat in Genesis 15 falls right in line with the Psalms that say that the horns are rising. It says it 3 times in one of the Psalms for this time we're living in right now. 3 times means God's serious. You need to pay attention to this, right? So the horns are rising, but God's going to cut them off. Okay, so we know the Antichrist end. So when this period, when the goat's time of rising ends, that's basically 2025, and then it turns into the ram. Okay? Ram is a symbol of military might, power, authority, and all that. So, but now the goat, remember I told you that the Antichrist is going to lead the Israelites back, and he's going to lead them like to the slaughter. That's what the Judas goat does. That's its job. The Judas goat they used to use, I don't think anybody does this anymore, but they would use a trained goat to lead the lambs to the slaughterhouse or the slaughter pen. They would then, because goats are conniving, right? They're different than sheep. They're mean, they're very smart, they're intelligent, and you know, it's crazy, but they would use what they called a Judas goat. He would lead the whole flock of lambs into the slaughterhouse. They would all get slaughtered, and he would get a treat, and he'd go back and get the next group. And that's a picture of here in America where they were still doing that like 50, 60 years ago, something like that. I forget what the date was. But that's the Judas goat leading all the little Israelite lambs to the slaughter. Okay? That's a picture, that's a pattern of what's going to happen. In the book, I point out that the Antichrist, Judas was a type of Antichrist, right? It's just interesting that they named the goat the Judas goat. It's not just one goat. This is historically, they've all named them all their Judas goats.
You got that.
Okay. The other interesting thing is here in America, I was reading this article about how they trained a goat to be the Judas goat. And you know what they gave? This has nothing to do with anything, but what they gave the goat as a treat once he led them? No. A cigarette.
Yeah.
Ew.
Really?
Yeah.
A cigarette?
Yeah.
Ew.
So he'd get up there and he'd have a smoke, and he'd go get the rest of the sheep. Isn't that crazy? A cigarette. Anyway, yeah. So reality is stranger than fiction sometimes, I
It
think.
is.
But
Yes, it is.
so it's in Psalm 55 where there are a lot of the scriptures that I used in my book came from Psalm 55, which happens to be the middle of the tribulation period. It aligns. Remember, okay, I think this is it. The Negenoth Timeline. I have a timeline now, right? Psalm 55. Do you remember the Negenoth, the stringed
Is this
instrument?
new?
This is new.
We were
Yeah.
talking
Yeah, I
about
haven't
that,
seen
the
this.
string instrument, though, we didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the instrument.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, in my book, I bring up Psalm 55 several times, but I knew where it would fit on the timeline. It matched 2028. And so it matched Psalm 128 and Psalm 80, which is the middle of the tribulation period. So I knew it was a psalm about the middle of the tribulation period, but I couldn't find a pattern that it fitted into until a couple of weeks ago when I was jumping in the deep well and figured out that there happened to be 7 specific psalms of the 150 psalms that the heading starts with play this on a Negenoth, right? And so because it was 7, I thought, let me go look at that. And it turns out they're in sequence. So it's those particular psalms, and that day is when I wrote this out on an envelope, basically, and have Psalm 4 talks about distress, Psalm 77 matching the same year, also about distress. Psalm 6 talks about God's wrath and anger, Psalm 78 matching the same year, wrath and anger. Psalm 54, a ruthless people trying to kill David in this case as an archetype of Israel. Okay, Psalm 79, nations invade Jerusalem. Psalm 55, I already knew that was the middle because I talk about it in the book, but now I have it in a pattern. And it just went on and on. Every one was perfect, right? So what it's doing, it's not only validating the timeline that's in the book, but it's also giving us a broader picture. So like every one you find, it's adding to the picture. So the puzzle is becoming more clear about what's really going to happen those years, right? Does that make sense? So, I don't know. As I keep digging, I just keep finding more of these. So I also did the Moses timeline. Okay, the Bible tells us that Moses was 80 when he led the Israelites out of Egypt, right? He says in Psalm 90 that at 80 we fly away. Well, here we are. Israel's going to be 80. They've never made it to 81 in their whole history, right? So there's a really peculiar number there for Israel, 80, right? If you put that on the timeline, that matches 2028. And when you read the Psalms for 2028, they're all about being led out of where they're at, like lambs being led by a shepherd. They're literally flying away from where they're at, and then you realize, wait a minute, I know Bible prophecy. That's Matthew 24:15. That's Revelation chapter 12. That's Daniel 9:27. So it's once you know all the prophetic scriptures, you can plot it now. That's what the 2 numbers did. Basically allowed us to plot this. So I did that one. Everybody get a picture that wants a picture of that. And then I did Jacob's timeline. And it all lines up too. I can't find that one that doesn't line up. So Jacob and Esau were born. We know that 77 years later Jacob married Leah. Of course, he thought he was marrying Rachel, right? But he actually married Leah. 77 matches the beginning of the tribulation period, Psalm 77. Okay? So he was 84 after 7 years. Where do we know 84 from? Hannah, remember the 84? That's the end of the tribulation period. So after 7 years of hard work and toil, basically, he had not only Leah, but he was also, that same time, 7 days later, he was given Rachel. Now, he still had to work 7 years for her, but he married her when he was 84 years old. There again, so it's a picture of, okay, so I have to back up a little bit, Caesar. So Leah is symbolic of the Gentile church, okay? Rachel, throughout the Bible, is symbolic of Israel. So if you go and you look, there's a lot of scriptures, I won't quote them right now because I can't remember exactly where they're at, but I have them written down. Leah was the bride that Jacob really didn't want, right? He wanted Rachel. It's really well understood biblically that God desired Israel, Rachel, right? But Rachel Israel, Rachel, interchangeable, didn't really want God, right? So God ended up, in this case, Jacob, with Leah. It all kind of makes sense when you start scratching around and really reading these scriptures, understanding that they represent certain things. It gets a little confusing when I'm trying to explain it. I'm probably not doing a really good job. But basically, anytime you see these sevens, there's something going on there that probably relates to the last 7 years, to the end times. And so when you, again, now we could plot this on a timeline. You've got the 84 and you got the 77, you got the beginning of the tribulation. I didn't know this, again, when I wrote the book. I wasn't looking at this story, so I didn't really realize that I could plot that just like the book. And then it's interesting that all these numbers match up. So the years of their lives match the current years of Israel's life starting in 1948. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you go from 1948 and you add 77 years, you end up at 2025.
Okay, that's what I was kind
Yeah, sorry.
That's
I'm probably talking around it, but not hitting the target.
Where was the starting date the starting year to that year that you're coming up with the 77 years, yeah.
See, I had 1948 up there on the left, where Israel reborn, but then that looked really confusing, because then am I saying that Jacob and Esau were born in 1948? So, yeah, I'm sorry. So, if you overlay Jacob's life starting at the beginning of Israel's rebirth, it all matches, just like the Psalms, the timeline in the Psalms. So again, I can't find one in the Bible that doesn't match this, which tells me it's real. This isn't just make-believe. God fully intended to put these timelines in the Bible. They're hidden. It's a mystery, right? He tells us in several different scriptures that he hid mysteries in the Bible, and he wants us to find them. It's in Proverbs, it's in Jeremiah 33:3, and other scriptures. So we know that we should be looking for these mysteries. And then we've got Daniel 12 tells us in the last days, he basically, God told Daniel to seal up these mysteries, right? These prophetic mysteries. And in the last days, that the wise will be able to understand these mysteries, right? Well, we're in the last days, and according to the timeline, we're in like the final minutes of the last days. So I think this is why these things are, people are starting, it's not just here, but people are starting to look at like the solar eclipses and like, wait a minute. So
the last solar eclipse that happened, when was that?
Sorry. Then my air compressor kicks on. I'm sorry, what was the question?
2017 was the first solar eclipse that happened, right?
In this pattern, yeah.
And that was the first time that the Jews found their Messiah, correct? Wow, that young man that's 33 years old.
Oh, I don't know what year. I stopped following that guy. What do they call him?
The Messiah.
Well, but there's in Hebrew, there's the Yannicka or something like that. I can't remember what it is. But anyway, I was kind of following that for a while, and I lost interest in it. Because he's not going to be the Messiah. Right?
No, I know.
He's not. Well, what I mean is he's not going to even be the false Messiah.
Oh, okay.
I remember Jesus said that many Messiahs will come, right? And there have been a lot of them. There was one, the Bar Kokhba revolt in 135 AD. They thought that this, whatever his name, Bar Kokhba, they thought that he was the Messiah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Jesus' prediction of that has already been coming true for 2,000 years. This guy, he's smart. He knows the Torah. He plays the piano and he does his little thing, and they're hanging on every word. But this gets really deep too. But the Messiah in 2028 will be 30 years old, so he's not even in the running.
He should be like 20 right now.
25.
25 right now.
Around 25, yeah. And I know that sounds crazy. Like, how can I know that? It's a pattern.
It's a pattern, yeah.
Jesus, when he became when he started his ministry, he was 30 years old, right?
Yes.
Joseph, when he became the leader of Egypt and basically the world, right, at that time, he was 30 years old. David, these are all messianic figures in the Bible, right? King David became king when he was 30 years old. Nimrod became the king when he was 30 years old. God established a pattern in the Bible that he wanted us to find,
Yes.
right? And so when you, this gets even crazier, because there's 12 Psalms of Asaph. There's one of those Psalms that's dislocated from the other 11. It's Psalm 50, okay? If you go to from 1948, 49, 47, you know, right in there, you can debate when Israel was actually formed, right? When was it? When their Knesset was first seated? Was it May 14th, 1948? So it's a time period. But basically, if you add 50 years to 1948, you arrive at 1998, 1999. Psalm 50 is an Antichrist psalm. It's got 6 verses in it about the Antichrist, and it's basically the tribulation period inverted, which is a satanic thing, right? Everything about Satanism is the opposite. Like Isaiah 46 tells us that, woe to those who call evil good and good evil and up, down and down, up. I'm paraphrasing, but basically good and bad, right? So, well, that's basically Satan's whole thing, is to take everything. Well, we're seeing it in our country right now, right?
Yeah.
In so many ways, what used to be considered moral now is considered immoral.
Yeah.
And what was immoral is now celebrated.
Abortion.
And other
Everything.
Sexuality.
other things that are
Yeah.
people are proud of, right?
Yeah.
So we live in a crazy time, but that's what the devil does. He perverts and flips everything upside down. So I think God established Psalm 50 to show us, and so I don't know if anybody else ever figured that out, but when I read Psalm 50, being the dislocated Psalm of Asaph, which means harvest, right? It was pretty clear that I'm reading the tribulation period upside down. So if you started at the bottom of it on the page and read up, it's like reading the 7-year tribulation period. And then in the middle of there's 6 verses, interesting number, that are all about the Antichrist. Was I answering a question? Because if I was, I have no idea what it was. I'm just off in space somewhere.
It's all interesting.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
The Psalms of I don't know. I don't know where I was. Tammy, you have any idea?
So are we
She's like,
gonna
you
go
just
through
dragged me in, that's it.
the Eclipse one next week?
Yeah. Do we have 5 more minutes?
Yeah.
Sure.
Let me just share something real quick. Yeah, 'cause what are we gonna
I'll give you
do?
5 more minutes.
Okay, 5 more minutes. So,
I'll give you
Let's
10.
vote on it.
blah, 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 blah.
That makes 10.
What I wanted to say,
5 and 5 makes 10. Another 5.
There you
If he
go.
does 5, so it's 15.
so we're back at
3
15.
votes for 5, that's 15.
So this gets even more interesting because I started listening to, there's a few rabbis that are teachers that actually have like classes for students, like at colleges or something. There's one in particular, he's in Toronto, I think, that I like to listen to because he knows the history, he can quote the Talmud, he knows the Mishnah, he knows all this stuff, right? So I wanted to hear about the solar eclipse from a rabbi's perspective, and it was really interesting. So I would have never, ever, ever in a million years thought of this, to even look for this. But so the first one that happened in let me bring that back up. The first eclipse that happened in 2017 in this 7-year deal, right? It did not, okay, we know that it crossed over 7 Salems, right? He didn't know anything about that. But what he did know was that it didn't cross over any major Jewish populations in our country. So he said, like, of all the major Jewish population centers in America, it didn't cross over any of those.
Yeah, the East-
However,
East Coast.
this one's going to hit all of them. This one will hit all of the major Jewish population centers in America. What that means, I don't know, but it's pretty crazy when you think about like how you've got the 7 Salems, and then you've got the 7 and the 8th Nineveh, and then to find out that the first one kind of sounds like the first one is more about the church, and the second one is more about Israel, to me. And then you go back and you look at the 7 years for Leah and the 7 years for Rachel. Kind of interesting. Not saying anything's going to happen on that day, but it's a warning. God said in Genesis 1:14 that he put these things in the heavens for signs, right? And then Jesus said, before the end, there will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. We should be looking to see what these signs are. And in Joel and a lot of other books, it talks about blood moons and the sun turning black and all this kind of stuff. We should be expecting that in the end we would be seeing these kind of things. The fact that we have 2 solar eclipses, total solar eclipses across our nation in a 7-year time frame is like, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but when you look at the history of solar eclipses, it just, this doesn't happen, right? They can calculate when they're going to happen, and this kind of thing just doesn't happen.
So this rabbi from Toronto recognized that the eclipse was going to hit over.
Oh yeah, no, they're looking for this, and they're like, and so so 2 more things. This solar eclipse that's about to happen, okay, is part of a pattern of 71 solar eclipses that have happened that started in 1501. This is the 30th. What does 30 mean? 30 is the Antichrist. It's the Messiah figure, right? They don't think he's the guy who's coming, they don't think is the Antichrist, they think he's their Messiah, right? Their Mashiach. So this just happens to be number 30 in the series. I thought that was pretty interesting. Reading from the Talmud, he was talking about solar eclipses and what they mean. Okay, number 1, the Talmud says that a solar eclipse, if you're living in an area that you see a solar eclipse, it's a bad sign for your nation. Like if it goes across your nation, right? Not necessarily for a country on the other side of the world. Okay, because they didn't see it. Oops.
But the world's flat.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're not going to get into that. Yeah.
Very crazy.
Anyway. So, yeah, it's a bad sign, according to the Talmud, for it to happen, and for the country that sees it, basically, or countries that see it. Now, add to that, it gets magnified if your country specifically either hates Israel or comes against Israel or doesn't defend Israel. If it's all about Israel, right? And the 7-year tribulation is all about Israel. So if you turn your back on Israel, this is a really bad sign. And like I was saying, they don't understand that Gog-Magog has already started and we're about to turn our backs on Israel. It just so happens that we've got a 7-year sign going on right now. It's crazy. Then he was also talking about the lunar eclipses and blood moons and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to go into that tonight. I kind of dug around, tetrads, and you can get really lost in all that. But all of that is usually not good, right? A lot of things happen, like there was a lunar blood moon tetrad around the time when Israel was born, 1948, 950, right in there. There were 4 blood moons, all of which were on feast days. And of course there was the war. So their War of Independence basically happened in the time of blood moons. The 1967 Six-Day War, tetrad of blood moons again. And didn't we a year or so ago see a blood moon here?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
That was
2
crazy,
years ago, yeah.
right? And I
2 years
think
ago?
It was 2 years ago already.
I feel like it's
time flies. I think there's a blood moon going to be over Israel next year
That was a blood moon,
in
that was
2025. So all of these are understood by the rabbis basically
And
through
this
their
is-
Talmud.
This is crazy that this is passing through the U.S. and not through the, you know, the
The rest of the
the
world?
rest of the world, you know.
I liken it to this, okay? You know, America isn't in end time prophecy, right? We're not in the Bible.
Yes.
You can say Russia is, Iran is, because it's called Persia, which is what they were called up until about 50, 60 years ago, something like that. A lot of countries are in the Bible, but America isn't.
Yeah.
You know, why? Well, when you consider that we are, you know, I would still call us the predominantly Christian nation in this world, right? But, okay, let's put it this way. I firmly believe, especially after the timeline, in a pre-tribulation rapture. I see it in Psalm 124 matching Luke 21, 34 through 36. It's as clear as day to me, right? Which means it's this year. Okay. What is this country going to be like post-rapture? It's done.
Yeah.
When the Christians are gone, you're going to have a nation full of Bidens,
Yeah.
you know?
That could be a mess.
I mean, you're going to have a nation full of people that are protesting at colleges against Israel and stuff, right? And saying all this apartheid nonsense and stuff.
Pakistan and all that, yeah.
Yeah. So that's what you're going to have left. America's done.
Yeah.
If this is correct, and every timeline I find indicates that it is, then post-rapture, America's done. And I
Doesn't
think
seem
this is
It
saying,
doesn't seem like the people left would be instantly terrified and want to turn to God.
a lot of them will. A lot of them will. I mean, if you read Revelation 7 and 14, it's really around the part where it's talking about the 144,000, right? But you see a multitude without number of people who came through the tribulation, I think it's 14, who were unfortunately martyred during the tribulation period. But it's a multitude without number from every tribe and nation, it says. So there's so many people. The tribulation period is going to be the greatest revival
Yeah,
in the
that's what I
world
would think,
ever,
yeah.
right?
That's what you would expect.
But unfortunately, it's going to be a horrible, horrible time. And that's, you know, salvation is free now. It's going to cost you your life then. Because the Antichrist is not going to have a competitor. He's not going to allow for competition, right? So that's why I say that if you realize the writing is literally on the wall, you realize that we are in the end. We're in the end of the end season. All those who don't know or who really are not paying attention, all those who have said, you know, my grandmother used to take me to church, but I don't really care about all that, you know. They're going to wake up one day and everything's going to be different. They're going to go, wow, my grandmother was right.
Yeah.
And I blew her off. I thought that was stupid. And then their lives are going to be a living hell for 7 years. And that's, I think a lot of people get confused that study this. They think, oh, well, the first 3.5 years are going to be okay. No, they're going to be okay in Israel. That's how they're going to bring the Jews back to
Which is crazy,
Israel.
though, to still be like, oh, I'm cool.
Yeah, right.
That'll be all right. Ah.
Yeah, no, it'll be okay. We'll get through it. No. Anyway.
Well, a lot of people think the aliens took them.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's the
what Bible
narrative.
was saying. Bible will probably say, hey, they all came in
Satan's gonna
tic
teach you that
tac
happens.
shapes, and they took
Yeah.
them all away.
Yeah.
And they all have to
While
be
you were
Christian.
asleep, America.
Yeah.
And
So-
blame it on the Republicans.
So Trump is out. I'm gonna take him
So blame
for
it on
presidency.
Trump for aliens taking people.
Well, think about it though. If this is all correct, right? I always say this. Yeah, I don't have any proof, but there's literally a mountain of evidence that this is correct now. And it just every week I study, it's just more and more evidence. And I'm not making any of those timelines up, right? Those numbers are from the Bible.
Right.
So if all this is true, Trump is not going to be president
Yes.
because we're not going to be here to vote for him, right? The Christians are the ones that put him in office because even though he's kind of an idiot with the things he says, but I love it. I love that he just says what he thinks, right?
I love it.
Yeah, a lot of people hate that
He
though.
does not sound like a polished lawyer.
Yeah,
Thank you.
exactly.
Jesus. Just talk normal.
but
I love when people call him an idiot.
his
because
policies,
he's normal.
yeah, his policy, yeah, he says what we're all thinking.
But everybody knows
There it
he's
is.
supposed to say those.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he's the normal one. Everybody
Right.
else is a freak.
But, you know, again, it's the Christians that voting for him will put him in office. And if we're not here, then, I mean, I just don't see that.
Well, I think he might be one of the people leading.
I hope so.
I
Pray
do.
so.
Yeah, we pray for him. I mean, I know he has a New Age background.
He was at a Christian convention type of thing where he spoke, and he said he has accepted Jesus. He says it.
Really? Oh, I'm really, really happy to hear
Said
that. I hope.
Jesus is his Lord and Savior. I heard him say the words.
Wow.
Because I've heard people go, "Wow, you don't know that." I'm like, yeah, I heard him say it.
Yeah.
Only at a Christian convention will you be able to say that. Right? Anywhere else.
I heard, well, I saw an interview with him a long time ago where he was saying his favorite book was this New Age book. I don't remember what it was, but, you know, like, oh man. And then, like, when Melania speaks, her theme song is The Age of Aquarius. It's all New Age
Is it
stuff.
really?
Yeah.
Did you know that when he was at the White House, that he brought in people to pray over every room in the White House, and took to sprinkle oil and pray? Did you know
Really? No, Well, actually, yeah, wouldn't that be fun? We'll all be with Trump in heaven.
Can I touch your hair? I wanted to do that down there so bad.
Yeah, he's something else. Anyway, anybody have any questions? I'm going to close with prayer and let everybody escape the funny farm. Anyway, all right, dear Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity to get together and just worship you and study and conversation. And it's just, I think this is a blast to sit around and actually get to talk about some of these crazier things in the Bible and how you've interconnected everything and put just things in there that no one's seen before. You told us that in the end times that we'd be able to unravel this, and it's happening. And we're just really thrilled, and we're thankful, Lord, that you have entrusted us with this, and help us now to know what to do with it, because honestly, if it's just us talking amongst ourselves, it's not really helping the rest of the world. So, you know, as I'm praying every day, Lord, I just really hope and pray that you will open up some opportunity to get this out there, because obviously time is very short. You want this known, and we're your hands and feet. So I'm struggling with trying to figure that part out. But Lord, we love you and we praise you. We thank you for all you do for us. Thank you for coming soon for us to rescue us. And a lot of people will say that it's, oh, you silly Christians, you want to be rescued. Yeah, absolutely. Duh. Of course I want to be rescued. You called it an escape, and you also called it a trap. It's a trap. What's coming is a trap for the rest of the world, but not for us. You're coming for us. We are your own. We are your bride. And so, Lord, we just look forward to that day where we will stand before you and hear you say, well done. We love you, we praise you, and we just ask for a great week ahead, and that we can reconvene here next week. And we pray tonight, especially for the Stransky family who buried Jennifer today. And we just pray that you would give them grace and mercy and comfort, Lord, and enjoy in this really difficult time. So we love you and we praise you.